good reminder. Of losing charger. Oh, golly. Where's Scuba's birthday? You don't know? How old is he now? Like 14?
Yeah, he must be about 13. I think he might have been born in August, but I'm not sure. Andy Kirsten, right? You remember?
So let's gather a little closer here and try and remember not to mumble. We have at least Marianne. I don't know if
Oh, good.
Padma and Stephen will hop back on.
All the travelers gotten their visas now.
That's a good question.
How many are going?
I think we are 7, including me at this point.
Really? Oh, that's a nice amount.
Yeah.
Great. Is it a straight flight through, or?
It can be, but the price difference was such that most of us got one stop.
Oh, where are you
Yeah.
stopping?
I'm stopping in Seattle. I think Zephyr is as well.
Oh,
And then Padma and Stephen are getting on in Seattle.
Oh.
And David coming from Quebec. I'm not sure. I think maybe he goes to Seattle too. I think he's on the same flight. I don't know if he catches us in New York or in Seattle. But
Nice. Very nice.
John, I think, is going direct, and one person's coming from Mongolia.
Oh, really? That's exciting. Is it a student or a monk coming from Mongolia?
Student.
Student.
So after we booked the direct flight, the prices dropped.
Oh,
Did you see that?
Down to the same price as the
Yeah.
the layover flight.
Yeah, I was telling Phil I had to turn off my
Right, 'cause it
Google
was
Tried
depressing.
Flatter because I was like, oh, flight number, yeah.
Never fails.
But it wouldn't have been, I take some solace in that it wouldn't have been in enough time to handle the visa stuff. So next time we can play it close because everybody has long-term visas.
At the moment.
and
Yes.
how long does it take to get up to where you're going? Isn't that quite a distance?
So we fly a few hours from Beijing to Xi'an, and then we drive kind of 3 to 5 hours
Oh,
from
boy.
Xi'an.
Yeah.
And we walk a little bit.
And you need to rest a little after all that.
His visa tomorrow, hopefully.
Oh, good.
Are you sleeping in Beijing or in Xi'an? Or?
The way it played out, we will be sleeping in Beijing, and then the leg from so we'll get to the temple that second day, after the first day after the flight.
John, no shoplifting in Beijing. I'm just heard that doesn't work out so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, except in your hand. If you walk toward the what is it, Imperial Palace or something, the one with the 100-foot portrait of Mao on the front. First of all your devices go dead as you walk in front of it, and then if you point a camera at it, the guards swarm you. It's pretty intense.
It's serious business.
Serious business.
Oh, boy.
Did you have other people manage to get the visas?
I think David's was smooth. Frances, coming from Mongolia, she's American. Hers was smooth. She did it a while ago. Padma and Stephen had a unfortunate kind of the form that the service that I recommended sent them with the wrong form somehow, and so it was sent and then sent back without acceptance. So they're walking it in yesterday or today or 2 days ago or something, and should go smoothly.
They gave us quite the runaround for.
Do you have code in New York for that?
We did, but we contacted a couple of agencies beforehand just to inquire, and because John was born in Hong Kong, I'm still in
Oh.
English territory.
Yeah, I'm a UK citizen of like
You
the
were
US
born
as
in
well.
Hong
So
Kong. Wow.
I think there's a slight difference.
But they made it sound really complicated. They made us like get paperwork, and then we got to the actual consulate, and they were like, "Oh no, we don't need it."
Yeah, par for the course. You know,
Right.
and it's not that the people who told you that probably had the experience
Yeah,
that it was
exactly.
complicated, but it's just you just never know.
Yeah.
When you
I think also when they're accustomed to dealing with like U.S. citizens or whatnot, or even UK citizens who aren't born in Hong Kong or something.
Yeah, and
these
there's-
like variations introduce
yeah,
senses
they're just
of complexity that may or
exactly.
may
They're
not
just not sure. So
Cypher was getting his yesterday, or he had said his was
Last week, Friday?
well, he dropped it off then, but then you have to go back.
I'm not sure he's coming.
Hope the intensity of this tea offsets the intensity of the day rather than accumulates with it.
Very good.
So what's your nickname? Kong from being born in Hong Kong, or a reference to King Kong?
It's a bit of
Because
both.
your massive strength and
Hairiness.
ability.
Hairiness, yeah. Big jaw, big teeth.
Rescuer of damsels and whatnot.
climbing,
Bulging eyes.
climbing
Big
up
knuckles.
large
Yeah.
buildings.
And all of the above, I think.
Were you living in Hong Kong as a child, or did you
Yeah.
leave before you could?
Just the 2 years. My brother for 5 years. So he runs
And then where?
England. South Africa.
So it felt like you guys were with me on that meditation. Is that the case? Did that support your understanding
I almost
or
fell out of the
experience?
cushion so many times. I don't know what's going on.
Excess stillness.
It's sort of like falling asleep, but just keep on catching myself in that like last swooping moment when you're just about to go. I don't know
Yeah,
if
I mean,
anybody knows.
if you're underslept and trying to meditate on a hot day, sleep is close by. Great.
I realized that you were taking us through the Tugu verbally between falling off the cushion. And I'm not sure how much of it was just going into a kind of a, you know, almost a trance-like feeling, or if I was really nodding off or what was going on.
Sure.
I really appreciate it. Sometimes when I've been fitting in practice before work, I'll do a very slow cycle, just doing one of each, which isn't ideal as like a, you know,
Yeah, it's okay,
like
yeah.
and so it felt a bit more like that, and that's often a very kind of still doing the movements, but it's very head down. Maybe just the element comes to mind,
Mhm.
just wood or.
Sure.
But I found it, the way you were filling in as well, opened up the feeling sort of passing through each, or the kind of resonances of each. I would like to carry on in that mode.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, with that kind of when you choose to practice in more subtle ways, it's worthwhile to occasionally return to the more coarse
yeah.
presentation to check your relationship and to because development's not linear. You know.
There might be a kind of counterbalance, like today feels like a relief, because yesterday
Sure.
I was out the whole day through
Yeah.
working,
Right.
you know, in the heat, you know,
In this
out in the heat.
culminating
So
heat,
this
yeah. Yeah.
So it might be similar to that, that knowing what's coming, then a very still practice is kind of counterbalancing that.
Yeah. Right.
But that might flip at other moments, and so going through more cycles or.
Yeah, and within the array of possible kind of active forms, even the active version of this is quite subtle,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So, but compared to doing shaking and fire dragon, or you know,
Yeah.
those kinds of things, which is very beneficial, but.
Yeah, I did 3 sources a few days ago and I hadn't done it for a while, and I was surprised how active that felt by
Comparison.
comparison.
Yeah.
Because I never thought of it as being
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, there's a way in which, I mean, you know, for context, it's definitely in the subtle part of the spectrum, but it's also kind of aggressive in its shaking out obstacles in a good way.
Yeah, yeah,
The 3 sources.
The 3 sources.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of the hunt
Yeah.
is very aggressive and
Yeah.
it's pretty strong.
Kind of tension generation
Yeah,
to open it up.
yeah, or even
Yeah, high hay there.
that high hay.
Yeah. Forget it. We've at least done it, but do you guys?
Yeah, a couple of
Yeah.
times.
Okay.
Did a video one time, I think the session that I wasn't here,
Oh, one of the Sundays. Yeah, yeah.
and I tried following along with that, and then there's a point where the video, like,
Oh, it was when it was
starts
from
freezing.
there.
Oh.
So I
Yeah.
stopped, and John was like, "You don't need the video."
It's like join the dots.
Right,
sort
right.
of brought out a different approach. And I was like, no, I need to know exactly how it's happening. Is my hand like this, or is it slightly like this?
Yeah.
Did you have a clear sense going in of choosing a more
No,
supple
it
or a
wasn't.
seated
It wasn't
form? Or?
planned. It's just sort of the really. Well, I mean, I don't know what, but felt the kind of links between the aspects of the scripture moments kind of synthesizing with the Tugu orientation in productive ways, and I wanted to weave those while I had them.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that was I was wondering if it related to a sort of scripture orientation. So
Yeah, but-
maybe I could see that a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, there are these various moments in each scripture that are available for making it continuous with our cognitive structure and with the orientation of an apparently separate practice.
Would you have things to say about ghosts and demons in the golden light of the ghosts running away and sort of being routed is an interesting image, and also the idea of, you know, vanquishing the demon and then having the demon protecting you is also kind of unusual.
Sure.
I don't know. Should I trust that? Would you-
Yeah, so, you know, so like the brightness and power and sound of the thunderbolt, the thunder and simultaneous lightning illuminating everything, it, you know, if you allow for ghosts and demons, or maybe more logically for how we are familiar with the language, just the ghosts to be hidden and held in shadows and corners, you know, then the sudden brightness illuminates those corners, and then given their essential nature as shadow, they have nowhere to be, and they also fear light, you know. But you know,
Do they tie us to the 10,000 things? Is that what? I mean, what is the negative?
well, as you can see, they needn't be negative, but yeah, they, I would say, perpetuate obstacles or manifest as a presentation of, or a kind of, they are our obstacles in a, like, without obstacles, we're the thunderbolt, and they're not there. With obstacles, we have shadows and nooks and crannies, and dampness that doesn't move, and you know, and they are that, and thus they are present. Does that organize it a little bit?
it could.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many connotations in our culture that I don't want to project those.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to
I mean,
project those, actually, but
so-
I'd like to, you know.
So you know,
see where the
it's useful to make these connections so that it's continuous with a kind of dense versus immaterial chi model of reality. There, we personify them in order to organize them in a sensible narrative, the narrative in which we live and make sense of ourselves. But it's just chi, and foul chi scatters in the light of realization. So I, to the extent that it's helpful to personify them, then we can engage them in that mode. To the extent that it's alienating to us or discontinuous with our model of reality, we can let it be and think of instead foul chi or resistances, knots, shadow, that kind of orientation.
One of the renderings in the Yuming commentary is unresolved issues. On that sort of psychological level, like you're saying, dampness or something that won't resolve, like
Yeah.
a persistent unresolved issue would be associated with that ghostly qualities.
Yep.
And the demon is something else?
No, not. I mean, it's one of those. So there would be traditionally a distinction between this is ghost and this is demon, and I'm not quite sure what that precise language would be. It's a pairing of characters that is ghosts and demons. It's this sort of category.
Do you have an idea of like what the symbolism is of the demon, watching over after being vanquished as guardian?
Well, so it's a turning around of, it's like murderers become saints. So it's a in this light there is no shade. Does that make sense? So one of the most famous Buddhas, kind of fully realized humans in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, I'm losing his name, do you know his name? Who was a murderer, who was famous, and he met with Buddha, or Buddha met with him willingly, and all of Buddha's disciples and were saying, "Don't do it, he's so evil, blah blah blah." And through conversation, then he became fully realized in a very short amount of time. But it's this kind of a kind of sincere and accurate hyperbole of like even the darkest shadows can be illuminated.
Can't help but imagine an almost like benevolent foulness with some ghosts,
You can't.
just can't help but linger. Whereas with a demon, there's almost a sense of like deliberate
Yeah, that's the.
intent to do wrong.
Yeah.
It seems like there's some.
I definitely hear that in the English, and I'm not sure about the Chinese, and it's something that it would be useful to clarify at the temple.
Michael Cohen and Donald Trump is. So I guess I should not try to.
Yeah, I don't know if they can even be at that level. I don't know.
But is the whole soul in the human is associated with earthly
Yeah.
and ghostly
Yeah.
qualities?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't hear what.
The po,
The
Oh,
yin,
no, no,
the yin.
yin soul.
Yeah.
that we're in right now is kind of shaking my sort of basic belief in the sort of fundamental goodness of people, and that everybody has some level that you can make contact with
Appeal to in a way.
and appeal to. But,
Yeah.
I find myself questioning that now.
Yeah, I hear you, but you know that can be appealed to only in the either absence of or loosening of knots and obstacles. You know, and so if that shell is too tight, then today at least,
Yeah.
there's no one to hear you.
No.
You know, or you know, today in the sense of at a particular moment.
No. So just look at them as piles of foul chi.
Well, so it does scatter, right? So the part of the one way to make sense of it maybe is you know, these tightening of knots that become, the knots ends up being not supportive of this metaphor of transformation, but the sort of density accumulating until it's rigid, and then rigidity breaks and makes way, you know. And so whether it's this month, this year, this decade, or this century, I can't tell you, but there is an arc that culminates and then moves in the other direction.
Seems like a lot of individual knots perpetuate through the kind of continuity of stories, or you know, things that don't seem like they'll dislodge being something that you're recounting over time, or that, you know,
Yeah.
the story becomes fixed, then the thing doesn't change, and the
Right.
interplay of those feels very different, but difficult to perceive, kind of thing. But I guess at a broader level, similar thing happens maybe through media or the circulation of texts when that changes. You know, you can look at like the invention of the press and Luther and
Sure.
kind of Protestant revolution, but you could look at mass media as well as being ways in which there are transformations in how sort of lineages or like stories get told over time, that those balances shift and people have, you know, changing relations to them at that scale as well. And,
Mhm.
you know, if millions of people perceive the same thing in the same way, then there'll inevitably be some sense of fixity, but
Which
yeah.
which eventually breaks, right?
Right, yeah.
And you know, like what's Kuhn's book, The Progress of Scientific? What is the what's the title?
Paradigms or-
Yeah, his structure is the establishment and then break of paradigms in science, and how kind of clear and rigid they become
Mhm.
until they don't fit with experiential reality anymore, and they're forced to
yeah,
change to a new
exactly.
model.
Yeah.
You know,
And then
the structure of scientific
yeah,
evolution. Yeah.
Ask the solstice marks transition to yin fire, likely, or if that doesn't apply in such a like firm way.
So it's not firm with respect to the stems, to my knowledge. With respect to the branches, it marks the center of the 3-month period, so it's the let's see. Yeah, in the branches, the yin comes first. And so it's su, snake, which is the yin fire, and then wu, horse, which is the yang fire, and it's in the center of the yang fire that the solstice falls.
Oh.
And then so then you have 2 more weeks, and then it's the earth phase of fire, which is like goat. It's this lazy afternoon rest, recovery feeling. Siesta time, precisely.
And in respect to the stems, does it have a different?
So it just
does it shade
doesn't
differently?
line up quite that. So it isn't specifically solstice. Let me see. So stems, following from Master Wu's presentation of the traditional material, it's yang is early summer, and yin, ding is midsummer or center and fullness of summer. So I think that logic holds that it would be it wouldn't be so precise as that as solstice, but it would be it could mark that transition logically. The earth works differently with the stems, and so rather than there being an earth phase to kind of appending and integrating each rise and fall of each elemental energy in the season, this is the branch structure. Instead, in the stem structure, it comes after fire. So both, yang and yin earths. So there's some things to parse in there, and I haven't thought about it in particular before your question. But as we talk around it now, that makes sense to me, that it would be the pivot between the two.
Certainly felt like a kind of confluence of events marked that moment. This here, or the way that I haven't noticed previously at least. Not least going out. I mean, it seems like the wind has been hugely changeable, like intense, but also in very sporadic ways. And last week I ended up on a boat for a kind of unexpected moment on a day where there were strong gusts and there was this alternation of stillness where there was absolutely no movement. It was maybe like 12, 13 foot boat, so it was really noticeable. And you're just drifting along, and then a gust that just kind of throws it over.
Right.
During which I ended up losing a new pair of glasses that I
Oh, no.
just got down into the river, and then
Wow.
sometime around the same time, there's a gopher who lives in one of the neighboring yards that had a brood of gophers,
Yeah.
or a groundhog. Grace managed to kill one of them in the morning because it was eating our vegetables, and then in the afternoon or evening we came back and we found another one wedged in a square about this big in our fence with its head on one side and
Jeez.
probably all of its organs on the other side. It was just
Jeez.
kind of enormous. But it was sometime around that typical. There was a sense of like slight chaos and kind of stuckness in these kind of somewhat ridiculous situations.
Well, the same day as the groundhog, we saw this a woman came off the road, ahead, right in the car ahead of us. And
Oh,
she was in somewhat of a ghostly state, I would say,
Yeah.
before she was in the car. And people stopped and she came screeching back on, and it was unnerving, but fortunately she was okay. But all of that fell on
right.
that day.
I guess
I think it was the day after the
she was
solstice.
okay.
She was okay after the incident.
Yeah, we're coming up on an eclipse. It ain't one thing, it's another, right?
I mean, I don't know that there are connections. It just felt like culmination of some
Sure. Yeah.
transition.
Sounds like Fauci scattering.
Yeah, well, the culmination of yang kind of
Yes.
squeezed things out. But it seemed like that first moment there was a, I don't know, associate that somehow. Full yang and then one yin just creeping in at the base.
Right.
Speaking of wind, I've kind of gotten this strange feeling when I'm in my yard on some days that the way the sky looks and the sound of the wind in the leaves, I think I'm in the fall. Have you noticed that at all on some days? It's very strange, and I've had
In
it happen
early
more
summer,
than
yeah.
once.
Yeah.
Just kind of weird.
Yeah, which is usually it's sort of a temperature and moisture quality, right? So
Yeah.
the night was particularly cool. The wind is changing the week or month temperature, and then there's maybe a lack of moisture. We had wind without moisture. Now we have them both, but before in the transition, I guess early spring it was very wet.
Very
But I
wet.
think the transition to dryness, but the continuation of wind.
Yeah.
I have had that feeling a couple of times.
You have. Yeah.
Heather and I remarked to each other how it feels like fall.
It felt like a clearing of the pattern that had been holding since late fall and through the spring to kind of open things up for summer to get in.
Yeah, that was my experience of it too. Yeah, but-
Oh,
Yeah,
boy,
like-
hasn't it?
and combined with the wetness, like just in your measure of like the lawn, like, not only is it flourishing, but it's not dry long enough to mow it.
Yeah.
You know, there was that time. Now it's plenty dry, but it's interesting.
Too late for planting rice.
So do each of you feel like you have gained a initial workable handle on the stems and enough to explore and develop to the extent that you want to? Anybody want to recite all 10?
I can count in Spanish now. I couldn't, but I do feel that you kind of have established a context for me to take it to, the next level, which would involve, really seriously reading the book that I have, Master Wu's.
Yeah.
put some context to, to read it in.
Mhm. Good.
I don't know if it was last week or the week before when we were going through the nuances in Maslow's book. You sort of like extended an invitation to explore that as part of the practice, and that felt like kind of an opening onto feeling beyond kind of more basic schematization.
Mhm.
That seems
Great.
start to feel those nuances. Seems like it's a good direction.
So the way you would put that into practice is to read one poem and then integrate, kind of carry that with you in the
I
tutor.
mean, it would be to begin by actually reading the would be a start, but yeah, to as we sort of have been doing in the last few sessions, to
Yeah.
read the poem, allow some sense of fullness around it, but without getting too bogged down in inquiring after the details, and then to just have that present during this.
Yeah.
I think that the practice is so fundamental in just helping you perceive the reality that we're in, the natural world and how it functions, and it becomes very clear that it's so fundamental to just looking at things and noticing things, or even things that you wouldn't have noticed before, even though it was happening to you.
Mhm.
Now, I feel like I'm seeing better, I'm actually, like just with that lightning,
Yeah.
I would never have gotten the visual, I may have had the experience of the visual, but I wouldn't have stopped and considered it.
Mhm.
So I know that I'm watching things and hearing things differently.
Great.
And so I just see it as very basic in that way, but also very beautiful. It's very artistic,
Mhm.
and it's very aesthetic, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It's a poetic vision.
yeah, it
Yeah.
really is.
Great.
So I want to continue.
Great. Yeah, it seems. Everything's an experiment. This feels like a good experiment. I enjoy it. I also enjoy both a weekly and a progressive structure. And also, to the extent that we can lay this foundation and make it available for people who couldn't be here, then we can get into other interesting things and all speak the same language and enjoy that, I think.
To be helpful in relation to, I think, because my previous contact, even just sort of coming sporadically, had been to kind of verge on or touch on with differing degrees of kind of depth, various different physical practices,
Mhm.
and in a way that kind of reminded me of the experience of doing internal martial arts, where it was described as like a toolkit, whereas in a way that was kind of scattering in the moment of being like, should I do this thing or should I do this thing, and do I
Okay.
completely know how to do this thing, and kind of activating those dispositions in myself that I would rather kind of attend to tempering. And so to spend such a little period of time on some practice in different iterations and with different energies and intensities is dispelled.
Okay. John was formulating here. They didn't finish formulating or decided not to go down that road.
With what?
Yeah.
Whenever.
You've been, no, before that.
Oh.
I'd say that just to prompt you to share if that's what's.
I can't remember what I was saying. Which is becoming increasingly common.
There's a lot of that going around.
Yeah, it's
And there's a
like-
lot of that going around too.
Is that?
Yeah, it is.
Whatever it was.
I feel quite happy with it, actually. And increasingly confusion feels. A state that involves the sort of dropping off of my chain of associations. And if someone can't remind me what I was saying, then I'm just like, oh, it's gone. I would happily, this might be my own disposition, but I would happily sort of, maybe in line with what you're saying, read something ahead of each session, just so
Yeah.
it's sort of going around throughout the week, and then
Sure.
it might just be the timing of that being, yeah.
Right. I mean,
and
as,
also
as
the-
you know, as a sort of part of the presented structure, like
Yeah.
that I would
Not
point you to.
yeah, just if it felt right for
Yeah.
everybody, like I would gladly have the discussion be focused on some specific content, but I
Yeah.
also, it seems like what comes up naturally through open discussion is also really fruitful. So it's sort
Right.
of like either
Yeah.
way could be interesting to play with.
Yeah.
Yeah. If everyone who's coming had read the same thing, there might be, different kinds of questions or
Sure.
something like that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, a good way to focus more.
Yeah, and that might be right, but I'm not sure if that's necessary.
You know what I'm saying about spreading manure so that enabling the sprout to grow.
That's right.
So,
Make sure it doesn't have persistent herbicide.
no, only from organic pastured animals, organically raised.
It had been my intention to follow the book more closely, but I instead followed what I felt like was the way of the group, because in a way we all kind of want that structure, but then if it's something every week that we didn't get to,
Right.
then it creates a sort of deflating atmosphere.
Yeah. Yeah. Because like just at this moment could work in some context, or especially with just a shared group over time, and maybe it's that makes that feel possible, like knowing that there's those different angles, and
Yeah.
get a sense of where someone's coming from.
Yeah.
Which is really useful.
Cool.
Every group must have its own dynamic that can sort of steer a class if you allow it to. And we talked a lot about things that were sort of practical aspects of, or just other people experience their practice or ideas for how you practice. And I'm still finding that to be very helpful for
Yeah.
me.
Mhm.
We spend some time on things like that.
Yeah. Cool.
Like, oh, okay, so this is sort of like more normative than I thought as far as, what I'm experiencing and going through.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, my not fully formulated plan going forward is we'll do this kind of thing with the branches and with the three sources form in the fall. And then that gives us the language foundation that we need to work our way through a particular text, for example, or structure a sequence of meetings. But then we have inevitably this is the structure of the presentation of anything, and so this language and alchemical or scriptural sources, and so if you picture even just reading the incantations of the liturgy, that if we were working with those without having a sense for the 5, the 8, and the 10, then and the 12, then each time we encounter it, we have to sort of gesture at this huge body of knowledge as opposed to bringing some familiarity into the language and then having access to the kind of integration that I was pointing to in the practice guidance today. If golden light is just a word, then pair of words, a thing, then it's pleasantly poetic, but it doesn't give you an opportunity for recognition or for weaving a coherent tapestry of understanding. So I think by circling these circles, including open discussion, because really, these sessions are, the first 5 were pointed and second 5 started as pointed, but at each poem. But there's plenty to tend to along the way.
Will you continue doing the videos, sort of elaborating around the liturgy and the scriptures?
Just a kind of drop in, kind of 5-minute
Right.
kind of thing.
Maybe throughout the summer. Was that your intention, or was it just?
I'd like to, yeah. I think that could be a kind of primary mode of weekly broad engagement.
I was going to ask if there's space for primary meditation, like the first part on a regular basis.
Uh-huh.
Sort of feels very supportive.
So as you mean part of a weekly or part of a regular in-person meeting or
I
part
wasn't
of
sure. I was
yeah.
just sort of, there's a feeling on my part that near enough by, and
Yeah.
that alone feels so foundational now.
Yeah.
Sort of very insightful, especially the way that you're opening up as you proceed through. It just feels continuous with
Yeah.
the text itself, and then if I read it again, there are those associations there, and it's sort of
Yeah.
opening up a more sort of direct daily reading practice.
Yeah.
Feels very fruitful.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, I think that that helps me see that you know, a non-topical regular meeting, which is basically a sharing of my practice, which is scripture and sitting. Would be interesting and supportive, potentially.
Would that be 4 a.m.?
So-
That'd be what?
But for it.
Oh,
So I have, you know, I have limited opportunities for predictable regularity.
Yeah.
I had
And
it too,
at-
but
at
there's
this point
pills you
it's-
can take for that.
At this point, it's probably won't extend beyond weekly.
Yeah.
But these little windows on commentary, and then, you know, potentially with a short meditation, not with a full. I mean, the interest, like, it's, you know, any one of these practice videos, if all the tech worked, could be a sort of follow along video, but part of what's interesting as I think as a teacher and a student and a participant, is the kind of difference in specificity of each live encounter. And so you know, it's not impossible, you know, maybe there would be another opportunity that would be just online or so, I don't know what that yeah, I'll keep looking for
Yeah.
opportunities,
Yeah.
for sure.
Seems sort of surprising that I don't know, that seems so favourable at this moment. It seems correct, the orientation around scripture,
Mhm.
as opposed to wanting some sequence or some layering of things you do. Like
Gathering
if
it,
the
yeah.
disposition is being receptive,
Yeah.
and there's so much in there that is the art and the teaching and the,
Right.
the transmission.
Right.
But it's almost surprising that that isn't more the case, but it feels like it's emerging with what you're doing, and I don't know,
Yeah.
I think it feels like the right thing to align with,
Yeah.
for myself anyway,
Yeah.
and isn't something I've experienced in other instances that aren't like heavily institutionalized as well.
Sure. Yeah, it's possible, but you know, we could blast the data portions in a weekend workshop or something, and then have our regular thing be simple. Because as you know, as you've observed, and I think it's part of what I have to offer as a teacher, like there's a looseness to the my relationship to the importance of the material, you know, like, but I already know it, so that's a little bit, I'm aware that skipping it is also leaving out important elements, and I think that it's in a way part of the teaching to present it, but present it loosely in that way, you know.
Seems to leave space for people taking it up for themselves. Just speaking of my own experience.
Yeah, I mean, the main gift I hope to offer is to help you become self-supportive practitioners, you know.
And unless you're working one-to-one, any broad spectrum method of imposing or making available isn't gonna.
Meet everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it seems correct.
Do you include Tugu and 3 sources in your own daily routine?
Yeah, Tugu I use mostly therapeutically. So if I'm off in some way, or if I'm meet some physical or emotional challenge, then I use it to address that. I use the whole thing, not part of it. 3 sources, I have a little more, like it's kind of just what happens. And I use it like returning to an old friend. It also has a quality for me of very generating very tangible, supportive lineage energy, and so I use it for support in that way, sort of in a way that's therapeutic, but in a different kind of. In my current structural existence, I can't make noise at my time of practice, and so I don't do that. But sometimes, if the rest of the family is busy, I'll come in and close the door and then have a practice that includes all of the sounding. So that's my current relationship to it. In both cases, it I have, you know, very extensive daily, I've accumulated very extensive daily relationship with each form, and so it's just sort of comes and goes in these ways at this point.
But Fire Dragon,
I'm not doing.
Did you
I haven't done it in a while. Again, I would lean on it therapeutically. The 5-element Dalian I use as a very sort of simple, direct, physically oriented. Keep the body moving in all the ways that it wants to move. I do it a little more casually than I do when I teach it, but that's present for me. Those are the main ones I'd like to do at some point. The 5 dragons, which I haven't shared, but it's a standing movement form that integrates well and very powerfully with breath holding, and the phase in which I did that extensively, daily, often multiple times a day, coincided with moving through a lot of energetic obstacles for me, and so that could have been timing, or it could have been the form, but I have that relationship to it, and I'd like to share that at some point as for pleasure and for a tool for you all.
I'd like to really internalized the Dao Yin form. It
Mhm.
got really close during the, I guess it was last summer retreat.
Mhm.
Didn't quite, get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Did we just do it in the morning? Is that how we did it?
So,
Did
I think we did it occasionally, just once or twice.
Oh, really? We didn't do it every day?
no, but we did it. Well, we did it more than, I think we did it more than
It was
twice.
yeah.
Yeah.
I remember
Sure, it
Bob
was
was
every-
really happy with doing it a lot. He
Yeah.
likes that form a lot.
Yeah.
Doing something. You could say.
Right.
Just doing something.
Yeah.
Do you always read the liturgy in its entirety in the morning? And are there certain portions of the scripture that you sort of, that are consistent, that you always go back to during practice?
Yeah. I don't always do it entirely. I sometimes, in this phase, I sometimes use my translation work, contiguous with my practice time, so it takes up that same however much time I'm awake before August wakes up. And so sometimes I use the translation time to be the scriptural reading time because it takes quite a bit of time. My feeling is that differently than I would have thought or imagined, say a year ago, I think that our group has the potential and interest to move toward recitation in the opinion, which is enjoyable and powerful and compressed as far as time goes. And that'll be supported by a kind of study relationship to the English translation that we can all listen to and enjoy in transit as well as in sort of study time as we're inspired. But I think that so that is to say, I am also in the process of building that chanting relationship, which I don't have fully formed yet, and I anticipate getting clear guidance about it at the temple this next week, a couple of weeks from now. So that's kind of how my perspective is. At first I thought, how is this going to work if you're doing it in English? It's great in this way that we're doing it now, weaving commentary and letting it shape the meditation and stuff, but for personal practice it becomes rather extensive if we're reading that out loud.
Sounds like a text and footnotes that you're doing in real time in a way
Right.
that could be that.
Right. So I think that the logical destination for each of us in this context is toward opinion recitation. And that may take a few years for us all to get there, but then and then our group practice may include that plus selective reading and commentary to inform the sit. But you never know till it happens. So we'll discover all that together.
I've been sort of surprised to find that, especially in moments where I feel like anything is strenuous,
Mhm.
that just reading
Great.
And also the pinion, catching the thunder, pops into my head very frequently,
Mhm.
especially at moments that are feel kind of trying.
Huh. Yeah, it's interesting.
And it's almost sort of for a kind of lack of anything else to ground oneself.
Mhm.
Like I definitely want to. I feel like that goes back to a childhood relationship with seeking some way to mark certain important moments or certain kind of moments that felt critical, and to give them sort of make space around them and
Mhm.
give them due sort of respect, but
Mhm.
not having any practice, having sort of a little bit been raised with, crossing oneself or something,
Sure.
but then that falling off and feeling like a very empty gesture. And so the emergence of that at these moments reminds me of seeking something, a gesture that one can make towards something recognized as being kind of a powerful moment.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. That's great. And so I think the incantations, and that is an incantation. The incantations will support us in that way, and especially when we have that rhythmic rhyming, sometimes rhyming feel for them. And yeah, so there may be some weaving there of part or all of the opening rites in English to kind of wade in, and then but I think it's not out of our potential capacity that we could parts of that are sung and beautifully sung, and we may be able to carry it in that way also. Yeah, in my Bun lineage, the main prayers are sung at the beginning of practice. They're short, basically 4-line prayers often, that weave around, and the end becomes the beginning, and it's very peaceful and beautiful, and so I don't have that relationship yet with the Taoist version, but it's there, and I think it's available down the line to us.
I haven't asked an obscure question yet, so I'm limiting it. You were just talking about the sort of place of translation as part of your reading and part of practice, not seen as separate from practice.
Right.
But you were also saying about the sort of poetic vision that's part of working with the content that we have been. And I have a vague sense that the being in that state, in a sort of poetic state, has some resemblance to the sort of transmutation, kind of alchemical. That in a way you're being inspired in that way, even the sort of
Sure.
You know, just the
Yeah.
resonance of that.
And spirited, yeah.
Seeing overlaying elements or something emerging or feeling like something's dropped off and then kind of appeared again. This might relate to my own process, but in relation to health issues, a lot of other things have dropped away. There's still a relation to work, but a lot of the things that have dropped have been creative practices, writing, music, various things. But having let that sit, I'm sort of seeing an association that entering into that state, whether it's through an instrument, through kind of mediation of writing or something like that, kind of does that. It's that your body is there and everything that you do, but there are certain orientations that allow some relation to spirit to be present to you and involve a kind of opening up and a kind of sense of making connections and things like that. I'm just wondering if that seems a kind of correct association to make, like a worldly instance where there is some transmuting happening. The energy that you need to survive the day and work and be a normal functioning person is being put towards some kind of pressurization that's leading to a different state being accessible, and sort of seeing that there might be an association there in terms of kind of you're taking something coarse and you're refining it into something more subtle, and I think it might be that the spirit level of that feels like it's not the pinnacle, but it becomes more apparent to you through the refinement. And so I see that with creative or aesthetic work, and then I see that I'm associating that with the alchemical work as well. And so I'm just wondering if that's that ill-formed association is at all. As you're working in alignment with the texts, the kind of associations you're making with translation are a way of working with material and with resistance, and through blockages, through lack of understanding and that sort of thing. But you're also allowing what's already there in the scripture to kind of come through your own experience and to find the right form for that. And, I'm not saying it's the same. I'm just, it seems like there's a parallel.
So, in parts of your expression, I felt like I understood, and some other parts I didn't. But so if I'm hearing you correctly, I think the answer is certainly yes. That they're parallel or identical, in the same way that Tianjin Hongrun presses down the brush to write, and reality is coming into being in this. So the creativity is a fundamental part of the pattern that we're participating in as we are riding this becoming, and that being creative is a way of putting down everything else and being with that creation, and to the extent that it can be not you or yours but simply happening, is the extent to which it's participating to that extent in the really real, and so as practice, it's certainly there. I think that we to substitute it would be to take away the opportunity to discover it, but to do it in addition with that orientation is certainly accurate and productive to my mind. It sounded like I heard your question right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I didn't have pre-made questions.
Yeah, so
Cloud.
so yeah, I mean the translation for me is it feels very much like a creative act, but it's creativity toward precise alignment, you know, so the source and accuracy. And but to the same extent in a purely creative outside of sort of translation-like structure, I mean, arguably you could make the analogy that any creativity is a translation-like structure, but to the extent that the thing produced has value is really the extent to which it is enacting that same path, because it has truth value. That's why, in a way, not at all like baptizing dead geniuses, all true wisdom is Taoist. You know, that,
Yeah.
I mean, I say
That's-
that.
yeah.
I say that as a quip, but you know, where you understand that Tao is simply what is real, then wisdom in any language, in any form, is, or even success, flourishing in any way,
Yeah.
is a
Or
result
truth.
of truth. Yeah, is a result of participating with none or fewer and fewer obstacles between the awareness is evolved and self-recognition.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap on that. Nope. And,